So picking back up on chapter 2, we're on slide number 22, or no, chapter 1, excuse me, slide 22. We're talking about an act called ERISA. And so 1974, Nixon was president, 72 to 76. Ford was in there 76, and then Carter. Yeah, so Nixon was president towards the end of his presidency. And there was a lot of things happening sort of historically in America. People have a tendency, or the media has a tendency, to paint our economic demise in America as happening over the last 10 or 15 years, but the original erosion of our industrial base started all the way back here. Right? It was the first time, and I mean, I distinctly remember this. I was 13 years old in 1974, and I mean, I distinctly remember it was the first time anybody had heard of companies like Sony or Toyota or Nokia or Ricoh or any of the Japanese and Korean firms. It was the beginning of the demise of our Rust Belt, our industrial belt, because it was the early tenets of globalization, where we were starting to get imports from North Asia. And so what happened to a lot of companies is they had, essentially monopolies, or at least very few competitors in many huge industries, from cars to consumer electronics to steel to farm machinery to just lots of big, hard, heavy manufacturing industries. And all of a sudden, with this crush of globalization, they started losing their market share, and they started raiding their operational cash to pay their pension benefits. Now, I'm sure many of you had folks who had long-term jobs for one or two companies that collected pension benefits. I mean, or maybe some of you, your grandparents were talking about. That's almost non-existent anymore, is it? You go to work for a company, and then your expectation is when you retire, they pay you a pension check. It's like that's almost non-existent unless you're a public employee. But this was a huge part of the culture of America in the 40s through the 70s. Was that you went to work for International Harvester or General Electric or Johnson and Johnson or Bethlehem Steel. You worked for them for 34 years and then they paid your pension, right? Right. Well, these companies started raiding their pension or their operating cash to pay their pension cash to pay their operating funds because they were going broke. And these pension funds collapsed. So there was an outcry, obviously, from workers saying, oh my gosh, we worked here for 35 years, what do you mean you're not going to pay my pension checks out? So that was kind of the underpinnings of ERISA. So what it was a massive piece of legislation that proposed or is reported to safeguard our pension funds. And it does that in two ways. One is a very important way, which is if I'm International Harvester, I can't put the amount that is actuarially determined to pay your pension benefits in another account that I have control over. I have to send that money to a third party, right?
But you have to be vested. You have to be actively invested.
That's the second piece of it. So the first piece is really just talking about where does the money go that's my obligation to you. So, like a good example is like the Montana Public Employee Retirement System, MPERS. Okay, every year they're going to look at everybody that works for Montana as Montana Public Employee. They're going to calculate at the end of this year we owe $21 million towards our pension plan. Right? It's an actuary determines that number. They can't just set that money in another account now that they have access to. They've got to take that money and send it to a trustee, a third party, so they can never get a hold of that cash again. Okay? So that's the first part. The actual cash is safeguarded by a third party. Right? It's usually like a savings and loan or a trustee or an underwriter, somebody that's set up to hold these funds and to invest them with very, very low risk parameters. Right?
I tried to do that recently for a pension, but I haven't been active
For a long time.
10 years. So I tried to roll it over into a different.
You've got to be really careful about that. There can a lot of times be unseen tax ramifications.
Well, I
So-
wouldn't even do it, they wouldn't even let me.
Okay. Yeah, just as a word of warning to anybody that's, any of you that maybe have instruments, savings instruments like 401ks or Roths or pensions or 403bs, when you look to move those somewhere else, maybe God darn sure you get good tax advice, because I've seen way too many people do rollovers, and once you've culminated the transaction, it's too late to backpedal and have a taxable transaction having occurred that they didn't anticipate. It's like, holy shit, I just lost 3% of my 401k, right? So always make sure, just as a sort of ancillary thing, to get good tax advice, somebody that knows what they're doing. Okay, the second piece of this bears a conversation about, and this is what Michelle was just talking about vesting. Now, I am going to turn on the lights up here so I can show you this on the board. So when we put money into a pension, no. Oh, I don't know how to get these on. Anyways, and it doesn't matter what the instrument is. I'm going to call it a 401k, but I mean, that's sort of the ubiquitous name, or a 403b, anything. Where does the money come from?
Comes from you and your employer.
Right. So primarily, and this is, I don't think a lot of people understand this, it's primarily a vehicle for you to fund your retirement. And if you're so graced, you've got some portion of an employer match. But that's not mandatory. Okay, your employer can choose to match or not match. If they do match, it can look as it can look lots of different ways, however they want it to read. They can say, I'm going to match you, for example, I'm going to match you dollar for dollar, up to 3% of your gross pay. So if I make 50 grand a year, they're going to match me up to what? 1,500, right? 50 grand times 3%. So I'm going to do everything in my power, to put away $1,500 a year, because they're going to match me dollar for dollar. It's going to double my yield before I even start earning any money in the market, right? So if you fund anything less than $1,500, you're just leaving dollars on the table. I'm trying to convince my younger son of this. He's living in Washington, D.C., and he doesn't make that much money, and it's really a struggle financially, but I'm like, they do this for him, $1 for dollar, actually, I think it's up to 5%. And it's like, you are leaving cash on the table. I would practically give you the money to put it in here to get the match, because it's just leaving it on the table. Okay, anyway, or they can say, I'm going to match you, 50%, and then they'll just give a solid dollar amount, like up to $2,000. So if I put in $1, they put in 50 cents. So, you can read anyway. But my point of all this, as pertains to ERISA, is that say that this is my plan, this guy up here, and I worked there for 3 years, and this is the situation. How much do I have? Yeah, $9,000, right? Because I put in $1,500. And then they match me dollar for dollar. So in year 1, I have $3,000. Year 2, I have $3,000. Year 3, I have $3,000. But I've got something more than $9,000, because it hasn't just been sitting there static for 3 years, has it? It's been earning some sort of yield or return. So, I'm just going to extrapolate this, and let's say I've got $9,600, right? Because I've earned something. Well, hopefully my yield's better than that. Let's say now I have 10 to 6.
Can that number also go down if?
Oh, sure. Heck yeah.
We all lost our work.
Heck yeah, it can go down. Depends upon what it's invested in. That's when you really start to not want to open up your statements. So, but right now we're in a crazy situation. The market has done 8.5% in the first 3.5 weeks of January. Well, this is a really long article this morning that is just, it's not based on anything. It's not based on absolutely anything as far as solid financial performance.
It's based on consumer confidence, one.
Right. Which is
And the
intangible.
stock market's gonna follow.
Right, but at some point, it's actually got to be based on profits, and it's not.
I know, I see.
Yeah, all the ratios are completely, all the ratios are pre-bubble numbers. Anyways, so now I'm leaving the company. How much of this do I get to take with me?
All of it.
It depends. It depends on the vesting schedule. Okay? If the vesting schedule says after 2 years, you get to take 20% of it, then what do I get to take?
You get to take your portion.
You always get your portion. I put in $4,500, right? And half of the earnings, right? So stick with me here. So how much have I earned in interest and dividends? I've earned $1,600. So the earnings is $1,600. And that's attributable half to the money I put in, right? Half to what my employer put in. So for sure, I get half of that. And I get all the money I put in, right? In other words, half of it, 53 half of 10 cents. Okay? So when I talk about a vesting schedule, that doesn't pertain to my money. The vesting only pertains to the other 5,300 or the employer's contributions and the earnings on the employer's contributions. So, whatever that is, 10 cents. Right? So my question would be, how much do I take with me? My 5,300 plus 20% of this. So, well, bad example because I said 3 years, so it's really 40% there, sorry. So whatever that is, 20. So, and then, and this is just a sample vesting plan. What ERISA says is that all plans, you have to start vesting within 3 years, and you have to be fully vested in 6. So it could look like, like universities look like this. After 1 year, almost all universities look like this because you're going to have trouble attracting faculty if you don't have an aggressive vesting schedule. Any industries that are competing for talent are going to have vesting schedules like this. But you could have a vesting schedule that starts really gradually. You have to start after 3 years. You have to start doing something. And then 5 years, 20%. But you've got to be to what? 100% by 6 years.
Is it arbitrary how much you do at 3 years? If you're going for 6?
Yes, it could be. That's really a good question, Dave. I've never seen vesting schedules go in anything other than 10% increments. So I'm guessing there's something in the statute that addresses that. I'm guessing. I don't know that for sure. Okay, so, but like something like this, if you're competing for talent, forget it.
Right.
Particularly with young people who
Move all the time.
move all the time. I've got one of my kids works in Silicon Valley, and a long-term gig is 24 months somewhere. They're just headhunted, constantly headhunted. So you're not going to get anybody in the door unless they vest within a year, fully. Okay. So do you understand these two premises? So that's the two. I ask you, what did ERISA do? It did really, there's one more screen. It did 3 things. One is it set up trustees where the money has to go to so you can't get at it. The second thing is it established mandatory vesting schedules. And the third is it set up something called the PBGC, which is this top item up here, the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, which is really the federal government at the end of the day is insuring your pension plan. Even with all these other laws in place to protect your money, it's insuring you. However, it's broke right now. It's in a massive deficit because of things like typo, and WorldCom and these big pension funds that circumvented ERISA and failed, there's been a huge outflow of payments out of the PBGC, and they are actually right now technically in default. But, you know, who knows, maybe they'll get refunded with the collaboration going on in DC to get a budget passed, so stay tuned, right? That's all I've got to say about that. ACA. Speaking of controversial, right? Affordable Care Act passed in 2010. President Obama spearheaded this. It was obviously his major piece of legislation. It was the largest socially engineered piece of legislation since FDR's New Deal. 70 years between. And what were some of the acts we talked about on Tuesday that passed as part of the New Deal? What's the biggie that it set up that we all know about? Yeah. FICA was the name of the act, right? Federal Insurance Contributions Act. Set up Medicare and Social Security. New Deal also set up unemployment laws. Set up the Fair Labor Standards Act, right? Minimum wage, no child labor. Lots of biggies, right? This was the biggest piece, most comprehensive, far-sweeping, far-reaching piece of socially engineered legislation since the New Deal. So pretty significant. There was two pieces of legislation embedded in it. It's actually erroneously called the ACA because there's two very distinct pieces to it. One is HCERA, which is the Healthcare and Education Reconciliation Act, and then the second piece being Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. And it did all sorts of things that aren't controversial at all, like streamlining medical records, eradicating pre-existing conditions, taking away insurance companies' lifetime $1 million max. Right? We had a number of our parish years ago who, hardworking young people, had a couple babies. One of their little girls got lymphoma. They go to Seattle, 9 months, they roll through $1 million. Right? And then the insurance company's like, we're done. So like, things like that went away. Those aren't controversial pieces of ACA. What was? Well, so, okay, so here's the purpose. Designed to expand healthcare coverage. And I feel like this gets a little bit lost too. What was the impetus for ACA? What was going on in our country when President Obama took over in 2008? We had 20 million uninsured people in the richest nation in the world. And I feel like that kind of gets a little bit lost when we're having dialogue about the future.
Illegal immigrants that came in?
Pardon me?
Does it include the illegal immigrants that came in?
The ACA?
Yeah.
No, you're not covered under Social Security.
Medicare,
ACA, nothing. And that's another misconception, but.
Yeah, that's why you answered it.
Yeah. And what it said, which is the controversial piece, is that everybody in this country now has to be covered by health insurance. And that takes a lot of different avenues. It might be employer sponsored, it might be on the exchange, it might be subsidized by the federal government. We saw expansion of Medicaid in many states, right? So there's lots of different ways to skin the cat. And we established, or the law established, state-based health insurance exchanges. Although I think 22 states sued to not have to establish state-based exchanges. About 10 of them ended up establishing them anyways. I don't actually have the phone numbers on that. And then it said, again, this was published a year ago, please note that as we go to presser, significant changes expected, which of course we've already seen. What impacted the ACA as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act? They eliminated the individual mandate. So since 2010 to now, it's been incrementally being introduced that if you file a tax return, one of the first questions I have to ask you now is, did you and everybody in your house have health care all year? And if your answer is no, or yeah, I did, but my kid didn't, or whatever, there's a penalty that gets tacked onto your tax return in the form of reducing your refund or increasing the amount you owe. That piece is as of now, suspended.
So because this passed at the end of 2017, is that no longer an issue for 2017 taxes, or will it not go into effect until 2018 taxes?
I am absolutely so unprepared to talk about the TCGA. I'm going to a webinar just to get my feedback. I don't believe it's impacting 2017 taxes. I haven't gotten anything from my tax software provider. I haven't gotten anything on my CPA blogs that indicates that it's going to, but with that said, the software just released a new newsletter, whatever, saying they're not even processing individual tax returns this year until February 4th. So, if you're filing today, they're not processing them because things just aren't finalized.
Well, when you pass bills like that, if it was gonna go back retroactive, that would have to be in the bill.
Right.
So,
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it's subsequent, certainly. Yeah. That should answer my question right there. Yeah. No, so it wouldn't impact 2017.
I got a form from CPA for 2017 taxes, and there was a form to fill out if my children and I had health insurance, and if we didn't, what months.
Yeah, so it's a subsequent
Yeah.
law. So other pieces, and I'm not going to dig super, super deep into this because again, honestly, how much of this is even going to be pertinent down the road, I don't know. But one of the premises of ACA is if you're an employer with 50 or more employees, you've got to provide access to healthcare to your employees. And it can't be just a really crappy plan. It has to have there's a value test placed on it. And I mean, this is where really you can get very, very complex very quickly, but it takes what's called a standard population, their average cost, and the plan that you purchase for your employees has to pay at least 60% of that. And then there's also got to be an affordability test, so you can't be bringing in plans where the premiums are more than 95 or 9.5% of household income. So there's a lot of parameters, and this is very, very, that's a big overview. There's pages and pages and pages and pages of statutes behind each of these bullets. Okay, so stay tuned on what's next with healthcare in this country. State laws, all states also have some form or have to have some form of workers' compensation. It's mandatory, no-fault insurance. In other words, if you're hurt on the job, doesn't matter what state you're in, you have access to no-fault insurance, vocational rehabilitation, income replacement, and if you're disabled or dismembered or you die, you or your beneficiaries are going to get some compensation. So that's mandatory, no-fault insurance, and all states require that the employers pay the premiums. In no situation can you be required to pay part of your premiums for workers' comp.
Lisa,
Yes, sir.
what Texas use some kind of insurance that includes something including Montana, New Mexico, Washington. It said in most states the employee can pay, you will have to pay part of something.
I will tell you, years ago when I first moved back to Montana, like early 94, I moved back, our state workers' comp fund was broke at that point, and we had this weird little tax of employees and employers pay called OFLT, Old Fund Liability Tax, to get our old workers' comp out of bankruptcy. But
So
we haven't paid
it's in
anything
the
since
book.
94.
And it's talking about workers' comp and saying the employer bears the cost of workers' compensation insurance premiums except in Montana, New Mexico, Oregon, and Washington, where both the employer and the employee contribute to the workers' compensation fund.
That's not a true statement. It was a true statement in 1994. We had something called OFLT.
That's not true anymore.
only the employee.
Only the employer paid. Like, and it was like, the tax on employees' wages was like 0.3%. But it was a calculated amount, an actuarially calculated amount that I think we paid for like 3 years to get our old workers' comp plan solvent. And once it got solvent, the tax was legislatively disbanded, and we've never paid into it since. So that must be what they're referring to, and I have no idea if the other two states, if it's
Which is funny, if it was so long ago, you would
Yeah.
have thought that would have been, taken out of there.
Yeah.
Not the 2018 version of the book.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. I'll be honest, I don't actually really read the book anymore. I've been teaching out of it for like 20 years. I write the slides for them, and they're sold nationally. Because when I first got the book, the aids, pedagogical aids, I mean, back when, call it one side, back when they were transparencies that we put in the transparency machine, whatever, were horrible. I couldn't use them, so I had to make my own. And then I'm like, maybe if I think they're horrible, other people think they're horrible. So anyways, I floated it by them, and now I do this for like 7 or 8 different textbooks because we need it. So I shouldn't say I don't read the book. When I'm editing the slides for the next year, I do read the book, but I did not catch that, and that is not a true statement anymore. State disability refers to states that have a fund set up for disability insurance. The difference between disability insurance and workers' comp is disability insurance also kicks in if you're hurt, or does kick in if you're disabled off of the job, right? So for many of us, if you don't have private disability insurance in Montana, and you're working and supporting your family, and you get hit by a car, you get in a horrible accident, or you get breast cancer or whatever, and you're out of work for 3 months or 6 months, who pays your paycheck? Even if you don't, nobody does. You have to purchase in Montana private disability insurance to get insurance replacement. And honestly, it is so stinking cheap, there's no excuse not to have it. I think I pay $11 a month per claim. And that replaces 67% of my income if I was disabled. Not everything, but it's a whole bunch more than zero.
Is that sort of like Aflac? Is that the
That's
idea?
exactly what that is. Aflac, Unum are the two biggies. And I mean, the odds, statistically, the odds of something happening over the course of a 45-year career that's going to take you out of the workplace for a certain amount of time is pretty darn high. And most of us we need our checks to pay our bills. And things would happen pretty quick if we didn't have it. Anyways, so in these states, it's a state-provided, it's a government-provided disability plan. And you can imagine what states they are. They're progressive states. It's California and Hawaii and Delaware and progressive states. We don't have it here. And usually they're paid a little bit by the employer and a little bit by the employee. But if you get hurt and you can't go to work, you turn to your state government to get your percentage of your paycheck. Okay. So, but we don't have disability, state disability here, and I can't imagine with our current state legislature that we would. Okay, and then the last thing, I get so confused. We started at 12:30 here, so we go to 1:50. These weird times, they changed our calendar last fall where we started on a Thursday. Tell me that didn't screw you up. And then somewhere in there they changed everything for my whole life here started at 10 after now. Anyways, it's just like old dog, new tricks is not working for me. So human resources and payroll are different areas, but obviously integrally linked. And there's a lot of federal and state laws that apply to both. And the payroll department is an accounting function, obviously. And in an organizational chart of a entity or a business, they're under the chief financial officer, the CFO, or the controller, or the finance director, or whatever the company calls them. Mostly modern term is CFO. And then they work very closely. Obviously, that data's got to be linked with HR. So So if HR hires somebody, they've got to send documentation to payroll that says we've got this new person coming on board, here's their wage base, here's their direct charge, here's their personnel files, etc. Okay, so HR basically, they are in charge of recruiting processes, selecting, how do we decide who to hire, how do we train them, how do we get them oriented, how do we compensate them, how do we incentivize them, how do we keep them, professionally developed, and ultimately, at the end of their life at the organization, whether they quit or they're terminated or they retire, how do we turn them out? So that's what HR does. And the FLSA, as we saw, can you remember what that stands for? Fair Labor Standards Act, 1938, part of the New Deal, requires very stringent personnel record keeping, and I think we went through that before. I think I said on Tuesday 7 years. It really depends upon what type of records we're talking about. There's different requirements and archiving. Obviously, most companies now are going to do some sort of microfiche or cloud storage of the data. But in the old days, I can tell you, you boxed them and took a black crayon and wrote on them and kept them in, temperature controlled, humidity controlled warehouses.
And it is 7 years.
Yeah. So these are just three sort of various things. I mean, this certainly isn't an all-inclusive list, but just some things that are really important that an organization spends time on in the HR system that obviously directly interlaces with payroll. Now, one is writing job descriptions. Why is that so, aside from the obvious of having clear expectations of your employees, why is that so critical?
Partially legal. If something should happen where an employee is terminated, you have that as a record as to what their responsibilities actually were.
That's absolutely correct. It's really a CYA mechanism. It keeps you, it reduces the propensity for discrimination suits, that I've discriminated adversely against somebody. It helps me comply with the Americans with Disability Act. So I hire you and you come on board and I tell you you're going to be, a bookkeeper or receptionist, but that also means squatting and picking up 40-pound files. Well, I've got a herniated disc in my lower back, and in no situation am I going to be squatting and picking up 40-pound anythings. And that should be right in the job description under physical requirements of the position. Right? So it helps with compliance. It helps with just a myriad of potential legal issues. Also conveys clear expectations to your employees. Secondly, requisition for personnel. We talked about that when HR needs somebody new. They'll hire payroll, they'll put them on alert that we're looking for a new person in the, development department. And what's the pay grade for this position? So that's a situation where they liaise, then they recruit and they hire, and then they're going to put in a request for payroll, for compensation. What are we talking about here? Oh, the last thing down here, applications. Okay, obviously, most of us, I would say, I don't know, you probably have a clearer picture of this than I do. What percentage do you think of positions now require digital applications versus paper?
85.
I was going to say 80-20. Does that sound about right? And I mean, I've had the same job for 24 years, and my other gigs are all self-employed, so I haven't applied for a job in 24 years. But my younger son is in high school, and we're riding is about to go out and get a job, and you need to go in, you need to, being the person I am, we're going to set up a spreadsheet. You're going to, go in and greet 5 people a day and look them in the eye and shake their hand, and he's like, you don't do that anymore. You come over and have to tell these, 3-hour personality profiles to get a freaking job at Arby's. I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, it's like, so and clearly I'm not one to speak to that. And then it just seemed to go off into la la land, and
You never hear back.
no, you never really got the jobs at the Arby's and the Arctic Circles.
Well,
and
and you
the-
never even get a response. That's the weird thing. It's like, even with these automated systems, the way that they, you know, you never actually talk to anyone, and then you never get any feedback. So it's like, even if you weren't considered for the
Right.
position, you never hear anything. So then you're like,
And you have nothing to learn from it, like, oh, you're gonna strengthen this answer,
because there's no
or,
personal interaction at all. It's very bizarre.
yeah.
There should be almost a whole piece of legislation on it, because a lot of times, they're hiring within anyway, they know who they're gonna hire.
Right, but they
You know,
have
you
to
stick it
post
out
it.
there.
They have to post
So
it.
you don't know.
Right.
What a colossal waste of time. Does anybody have a story about a great job they got through a digital application process? Anyone? Has anyone here gotten a job online? And you through an online thing? You
Not
might
very
share?
long.
Maybe.
Oh, through Craigslist. But the application wasn't online.
I looked at that TV.
Okay, oh, that is all online.
That's not my
I had a girlfriend apply for that, one of my very best friends from my childhood moved out here after lessons, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, she just needed to get a job kind of straight away. And that was the craziest application process I've ever seen. She had to be answering, talking on some Skype, responding, and then also taking notes. And I mean, it was not for the faint of heart. I'm like, I would have done a hot maps, like trying to get through that application.
Yeah, that's how it's in Providence now too, because I worked at St. Pat's from 97 to 2005, and then reapplied there in 2010.
Find out that you could
2014, and in 2014, it was so different. Everything is based out of Renton, Washington, and you're on a video conference call with an interviewer in Washington trying to do all of this. It was so bizarre. I'm like, can't I just go down to HR and talk to the people that I know and they'll give me the job? Like, you can't. It's very bizarre.
And God forbid if you're somebody that's not comfortable in that venue.
Yeah, it was really weird.
I'm always like thinking I had a double chin and trying to do something.
You would never put up. Yeah, no, it's very bizarre.
Okay, anybody else?
Sales, before they closed, they had all their applications up online along with a 30-minute long survey of work policies that you have no idea if you should know them or not already. And then it goes through the process of going to their home, to their corporate, they go through all that information, send it back to the manager, they go through all the information, you have to sit down and interview with people the one time, then they have to get 3 different other managers to call you and have phone
Oh my
interviews
God.
before you do the job.
I mean, there's a security issue, obviously, if you're handling gems.
Yeah,
So
so
there's,
there's superior rules on that one, but just the hoops you have to jump
Jump
through
through
just to
the
get to the job
Wow.
was insanity.
so did they keep a good contact with you during the process?
The manager is because I work in them all the time, so I was able to go check their time now and then.
So there was a real human being.
There was a little thing we had to go talk to, but he said like, I have no idea what your application is, like, it's at home office right now, I can't listen to it until I see it.
Well, it kind of weeds things out too sometimes as an employer having to do it. I mean, it's nice to have that one-on-one, but you also, you know, it kind of tells you who's serious about it.
Yeah.
Who's going to be committed and.
I totally concur with that. I would also, though, and I mean, I can make a counter argument to what I'm going to say in my head while I say it, but I'll say it anyway. I feel like there could be some age discrimination with that being a part of the process. But the flip side is, I don't care how old you are, if you're coming into my company, you've got to be part of the digital era because it's here. And that's great that you typed really quick and took shorthand. Those are not valuable skill sets anymore.
Right.
So, I mean, I can kind of see both sides of it. Makes me thankful once again that I through the process. Yeah, so it's just, as everything, devolving and evolving very quickly. Another thing, I'll just encapsulate this really quickly, is that the whole process, I think that, folks from my era certainly went through, where you gave references, and then your prospective employer called your references, you had a conversation about the person. GONE, I mean, that's just gone. There's way too much potential liability around it, and libel litigation. Then there was a small period there, maybe 2 or 3 years, where it's like, Well, you could call the prior employer, which is, and verify dates of employment, just to make sure they actually were there. And even that has shown that there's some potential exposure, of liability exposure. So when people put together these really elaborate reference sheets, some employers will still ask for it, like in a town this size. It's nice because you know people. It's like, oh, we had a coffee with her, and she's on a board I sit on, or something like that, where you make those kind of community connections. But as far as the old days where people are really picking up phones, you just open yourself up to litigation.
So can you not do that then, to like give that information to a different business when they're asking for a reference?
You can, but you're opening yourself up to the risk. We have the same issue here. Every fall, our chief counsel from campus comes over and cautions us about all sorts of things that opens us to risk. In the old days, you're a kid, 18, 19 years old, I know you're still living at home, I have small classrooms, I know most of my students. Your mom calls, I'm like, hey, yeah, how's it going? And we sit and talk about our son. Oh, God, no. Right? You're not talking to anybody other than the student. You're not talking, somebody calls me if she's thinking about hiring you, and she and I are good friends in the CPA community, and she calls me and is like, so what do you think about Mike? I'm like, he's a student. Does he come to class? I can't comment on that. Does his work technically comment? I can't comment on that.
Yeah, I've made those calls in like the restaurant business, and they were all pretty openly like.
Yeah, I mean, you can talk.
Like, yeah.
You can talk.
Yeah.
But I mean, God forbid.
Somebody comes back on it and says, well, they didn't speak the truth, or
Or they were giving me, they never liked me.
Right.
Or they were jealous of me, or a lot.
They were sabotaging
Also
somebody.
check that.
Right.
Or it was objective, like, yeah, he worked for me, but you know what he did? He stole. Or he was never on time. Or whatever. Now I'm divulging confidential data about you. Even though it's objective and I can back it up with documentation, we really can't say anything anymore.
It doesn't seem right,
I know.
because if you're gonna hire someone and you're gonna buy that by stole, you should be able to get that.
I know. Or, go ahead.
That'd be on a background check, though.
If there was
proper
prosecuted.
recommendations, right.
If it was prosecuted. And then the other thing is too, that I find sad from a personal standpoint, is that say I've got 5 students and I've got 5 employers, and I know in my mind where each of those potential students would culturally fit with the different employers, just by who they are, how old they are, how comfortable they are in certain environments. And I can't kill a shit out of employers. Anyways, that's,
Lisa?
yeah.
It said something about at-will employees, they can be, somebody can be terminated
Yeah.
if they just don't fit in.
Yeah.
They're just not getting along.
We have that will employment in my community.
So that's what at-will means, is you just.
You don't have to have due cause.
Do cause.
Isn't that only during like probationary periods though, or is that being done?
I think there's a probationary period in Montana.
And it is a probationary period, but the question is the at-will statute only apply to the probationary period?
If you're at someone for like 10 years, maybe like people I'm sorry.
But for example, at-will, say that you are, I had actually, this situation just happened to a student I graduated like a decade ago. She's been working for a light manufacturing company. And it was a family business, and the dad retired, and the daughter and her husband took over. And they clashed, and obviously they didn't go, she did. So that is, that was at-will employment 10 years later, and she's been a great employee.
I found that thing with references, what if you are requesting a letter of recommendation and, because you're requesting it, is that pretty?
I don't know, I think that is safe. I don't know how standard that is, but I know that I can speak to, both of my kids leaving college and entering the professional world in the last 5 years, and we encouraged them to get those letters from their internships that they did in college, and they always included those. They PDF those in the packets that they submitted to their employers, and I have to assume that strengthened their applications, that they have glowing letters from internship directors.
Yeah, I would think it would.
So,
And I think again, it's subjective because you're not going to ask for a letter of reference from somebody who's not going to give you a good reference. And you're not going to put a reference down on your application from somebody who's going to backstab you and give you bad information. So I mean, it's sort of like, it's information that's great that you're providing it.
But it's also really
how
staffed.
needed is it? Right.
Exactly. Yeah, good point. Clearly staffed. You're not going to put a letter even that says like, she's okay.
They're okay.
Yeah, she showed up.
She passed.
You do have to keep the applications for a year, so when you solicit applications, that's for potential discrimination clauses or cases. You have to keep the applications for a year, and you can only do aptitude testing or profiling or customer service psychological testing, anything like that, if it's directly pertinent to the task that the person will be doing for their position. And that's what we just talked about. Credibility of references are really diminished. Okay. So basically then just to kind of finish up this, went the wrong way. Finish up this chapter. So the payroll system, we're going to be looking at two basic records. One is the payroll register, and this looks very much like what you're pulling out of the back of your book, that long skinny one. And this is where we accumulate all the information for each payroll. Obviously, most companies are no longer doing manual filling in all these little tiny numbers and footing and cross-footing things. Although surprisingly, I mean, my very first tax client of the year is a small computer support company, husband and wife, and she still brings me payroll registers that look like this that I use to reconcile and do her W-2s. So you do see it. But obviously most of these are now behind the scenes, so to speak. You just have input fields, but this is basically what's being compiled, and then it takes the information to the employee's earnings records, which is per employee. Okay, let's take, and then outsourcing. This is a huge wave where companies, and not just in payroll, but in marketing and social media management and research and development and lots and lots and lots of things, is you identify what your core operational area is and what your core strengths are, and then everything else is considered to be peripheral and not your area of expertise, so you outsource it to somebody that's all that they do. Right? It's a process payroll.
So you do payroll and taxes?
I don't do payroll. I do taxes, but she brings me her payroll register to reconcile and do her year-end stuff. Yeah, no, I don't do payroll. But I did for years, and it's great bread and butter money. Great bread and butter money. People don't want to do it, they don't want to mess with it. And I was always so vested in trying to, you can do your own payroll. Honestly, I'll just come over and show you how. My husband's like, what are you doing? Just do it. Charge them. But anyways. So, and then it's telling us here at the bottom, reduce the risk of unpaid payroll taxes. This is a pretty big deal. You've got to pay FUTA, you've got to pay SUTA, you've got to pay FICA, you've got to deposit the federal income tax and the state income tax. There's a lot to it. You miss it, or you don't do it properly, you're going to get penalized, right? So there's a lot to think about. All right, let's take a quick peek at your homework. Nothing too super heavy the first day here. What page is our homework starting on? Okay. And let's see, Betsy, do you want to read the first one and tell me what you did or thought? Yes, please. What numbers are we doing? Let me just write it up here.
3, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Okay. All right, great.
Those are the review questions.
Yep.
And you gave us 2 discussion questions. 2 to 5.
Okay, thanks so much. Go ahead and read 3, please.
It says, who pays the Social Security taxes that are levied by the Federal Insurance Contributions Act? Both employee and employer.
Yep. So it's both an employee and an employer tax. Anybody remember what the total amount going is in between the two? For every dollar you earn, how much goes in? 15.3% between both. 7.65 employee, 7.65 employer. Okay. David, 9.
12 weeks.
What's the question?
Sorry.
Oh, that's a FMLA.
Yeah, and the question's not real detailed, so 12 weeks would be like.
Yeah. I think 12 weeks, and we saw 26 if it has active military duty, right? Yep.
It just doesn't go into the 50 or more employees.
Right. Well, that's implicit. You're just not covered under FMLA if you don't have 50 employees. Number 10, Claudia?
Primary purpose of ERISA is to safeguard persons' funds by regulating how funds are to be raised. And then I think ERISA was designed primarily to ensure that workers covered by private pension plans receive benefits with their, that's in accordance with their years of service and the.
Yep. Basically, when you're planning on getting a pension, they want to make sure you actually get it, right? Because that's a pretty integral part of your retirement planning. Okay, thanks. Rose, 11?
Explain the concept of the vesting. Vesting is when employees work long enough for 36 years for a company that they can or receive a no longer work for the company.
Good. And which part of the payment does vesting apply to? Employee, employer, or both? I think it's the employer contributions, because there's no concept with vesting with your own money. You always get your own money back. You can't not vest in your own money. A vesting schedule pertains to the employer's contributions and the earnings on the employer's contributions.
I don't know if the book mentions, I don't remember seeing it, but yeah, because I was thinking, at first I was thinking that it's your own money counted too, and I don't think that's.
Yeah, no. You can never lose your own money or interest and dividends on your own money. Okay, Shelley?
So number 12
Yeah.
was under ERISA, it requested in writing what information must the administrator of the pension fund supply to participants. And it's a statement, and they only have to provide it once every 12-month period. And it's of the total benefits accrued, the vested accrued benefits, and what the earliest date those amounts could be pulled if vested.
Right, I think it comes like on there's a form number, comes on something.
Yeah, there was a form that it comes with.
So, and that's part of the thing too, as an employer, when you set up these pension plans, you've got pretty stringent record keeping,
Yeah.
Requirements. And so you've got to have somebody on staff that knows like, oh, the 5,500s due. And how do I accumulate the information to make sure that that's appropriate and adequate? And I think we'll skip number 2 because we just did that, the problems with references. While you're looking that up, Shelley.
It is 155.
It's a 5,500, okay. So Michelle, on 5, they're wondering on their application if Horner Company can ask the name of your church and what religious holidays do you observe? Can they do that?
No.
No. Can they ask you if you're available to work on Sundays?
Yes.
Sure, but they can't tie it in to get any connotation of what your religious beliefs are. Don, what about?
They're hiring me for like pastor of church.
Okay, great point. Yeah, if you're getting hired to work in the Missoula Catholic School District, you have got to be not just a member of a Catholic church, but a tithing member of a Catholic church. So yeah, if it's directly tied in, certainly they can and will. Yeah, good point.
Lisa?
Yes,
I'm sorry.
You're fine.
I did kind of a blanket answer to that one because questions were legal. If Horner can prove their modified occupational qualifications.
right. Yeah, that's the caveat, isn't it? If you can directly tie it into this matters.
Is that too general?
No, that's pretty good. Like the next one is birthplace.
Right, you cannot do
Well, you can't ask for birthplace, but you can ask for what? On number C, I think isn't that
A citizen of the United States.
Are you a
which
citizen?
have to be,
Yes, you can.
or you have to have those documentation saying you work in the United States.
Right.
So,
So I can't ask you, oh, say, were you born in India or Pakistan? I can't ask that, but I can ask, are you documented, have the documented ability to work and prove that you're,
It's like on one hand, there's questions you cannot ask. You cannot ask if they're married, with children, what religion, their birthplace, and there should be one other one.
national origin, gender.
Gender, that's
And those, that's just under the Civil Rights Act, and there's much more, there's expanded protected classes under state laws. I can't ask your sexual orientation, I can't ask your age. So that it's expanded under state laws. Okay, and then, what's your name back here, I'm sorry? Christopher, oh, yeah, of course. Can you ask them about languages they read, write, or speak fluently?
If it was a qualification job, yes, obviously, if you're dealing with national business, that'd be an asset. But otherwise, it really would be used to potentially discriminate.
Yeah, very good. So I would actually concur with David that you could just have the caveat that if it has something to do with a bona fide occupational premise, you can ask. Okay, the last thing I want to do today before we say goodbye for the weekend is, how good does that feel to say already? This is on Moodle. You need to start learning this. This table is set up as 4 employee taxes and 4 employer taxes. These are the taxes that you will be responsible for taking out of people's paychecks. On the right-hand side are the taxes that the employer is responsible for paying. What you will notice immediately about this, and I am going to ask you to replicate this table, is that the first 2 lines are exactly the same for employee and employer. OASCI, which stands for old age, survivors, and disability insurance, commonly known as Social Security. Caps at $127,200. So once you hit that amount of gross compensation, you're done paying that tax. 6.2% for each party. So 12.4 total off the slate. HI, no cap. 1.45%. If I make $5 million a year, I pay 1.45% on all of it. And I pay 0.9 on my wages over $200,000. This was part of the funding for ACA. So is that going to stick around? I don't know. Right now, it's still a law, but it's a pretty despised. I mean, obviously, it's got to do with taxes. It's not a cherished thing with the current situation. Okay, this is wrong. This is not our fixed tax brackets anymore. No, but it's what we're using because it's way too freaking complicated. It's trying to get you to do numbers that doesn't agree with the book. So we're just going by the numbers that were in law when we bought the book. These are the numbers that were in law. And then SIP is 1 to 6.9% in Montana. FUTA 0.6, and no cap on either of those, obviously. FUTA is 0.6% on the first $7,000 that I pay each person each year. And SUTA depends on a lot of things. How much turnover do I have? How long have I been in business? What kind of business am I? And that the cap on the wage is $32,000 per employee per year. So within, I can even get to the date, probably about a week or so, I'm going to ask you to be able to spit this table out and also to do the acronyms. So on February 6th, we'll have a quiz over that. That's the week from Tuesday,
When you said acronyms, do you mean all the ones that we just went over?
Okay, yeah. ERISA, ACA, FMLA.
Love acronyms, you probably shouldn't be
But it's just, that's how everybody talks. It's kind of like, the day one Spanish class that you learn, right? Yeah, you put your hola, que pasa, but you also learn the alphabet, right? This is like the alphabet of the world.
And really, almost every employer has like their little acronyms that they go by.
Sure. I mean, I'm sure there's a ton of them in benefit management. You know, it's fun. My son is a construction engineer, and like, I really have no idea pretty much anything. Just so it sounds like you're doing great. Okay, have a great weekend. We'll start on chapter 2 on Tuesday. No homework for Tuesday.
Hey, Lisa,
Yes, ma'am.
signing on with our access code.
Oh, right.